Computer. Hi there, my name is Renee Hobbs and welcome to tonight's webinar. This is a Media Smart webinar sponsored by the Media Education Lab at the Harrington School of Communication and Media at the University of Rhode Island. And tonight's topic, of course, is something I've been thinking a lot about. The topic is mind over media, analyzing propaganda. And I'm very delighted that we have online participants, and we know some of you are watching this recording, and obviously people I think will be joining as the hour goes on. But in the next 60 minutes, what I'm hoping to do is introduce you to a new crowdsourced educational website for classroom use called Mind Over Media, Analyzing Contemporary Propaganda. In the presentation, what I thought I would do to make sense of this is kind of talk for about 20 minutes or 35 minutes, give you a little tour of the website, maybe do a little lesson from the curriculum, and then have a deeper dive conversation about how we might imagine using a digital tool like this in the context where we live, work, and play. But before we get started, why don't we introduce ourselves to each other? Because even if we weren't talking about mind over media or contemporary propaganda or media literacy, we'd still have a lot to learn from each other just in a free-flowing dialogue, wouldn't we? So, Dusty, why don't you go first? Tell us about yourself and your interest in propaganda and media information literacy.
Well, I'm a recently retired librarian and professor from the Community College of Rhode Island. And so now I teach as an adjunct professor. I teach information literacy classes to ESL students. And so I am interested, and we've recently had moved to a 3-credit course. We used to teach just 1 credit course. And the 3-credit course allows us to add a whole lot more to the discussion. And propaganda is something that is important. Students take everything they see and accept it without thought. And, so I want to add this to my course.
Cool. And of course, I'm thrilled that at least some of your learners are ESL students, because the global nature of propaganda provides a great opportunity for them. Hi, April. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, areas of expertise, and interests?
Hi, everyone. I am at a secondary charter high school in Southeast Florida, West Palm Beach. I am the literacy coach for the school. I prepare and present professional development for a staff of 60, and I am in charge of the new teacher program. My focus for my work is using media as an alternative form of assessment. And with that said, one of the most important areas that we find students are weak in, especially at the secondary level, is assessing validity and reliability across all kinds of text and media.
So there's a great connection there. Thanks so much for sharing. Sarah, can you introduce yourself to us? Tell us a little bit about your areas of expertise and your interest in propaganda.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Gretter. I am a doctoral candidate at Michigan State University in the Department of Educational Psychology and Educational Technology. In my research, I look specifically at media and information literacy for educators. So I work a lot in the teacher education program at Michigan State, and specifically on how to help educators gain the skills to help students navigate those online spaces where facts and fiction can really interact, and where propaganda can really have an impact on students.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I also see Jess Willard has joined us. Jess, welcome to the webinar. Can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about your areas of interest and expertise and your interest in the topic of propaganda? Jess? Okay, we're not hearing from Jess, but maybe we'll try a little bit later. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you and give you kind of a quick and dirty tour of Mind Over Media. I'm taking you right now to the website. That's mindovermedia.tv. right? And basically, in the next 30 minutes, what I'm going to do, I've found that sometimes doing a live tour of the website can be a little bit challenging. So I'm going to give a kind of combination of a little bit of PowerPoint slides, then back to the website as we explore. Okay, so obviously, just to frame up like why this matters, right? Media systems are expanding, literacy is expanding, and the concept of media literacy is an expanded conceptualization of literacy, right? Or another way of putting it is the sharing of meaning through symbols. But media literacy is also a civic competency, right? It's a part of the long march toward participatory democracy.
Hey, your beer's in the freezer.
So, it's so cute.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
It's wonderful. It's just like family. I'm going to now just have a little sip from the guys. That was adorable. Right. So, it's not just about civic education, though. It's about questioning all forms of authority, right? And that idea that critique of textual authority and institutional critique of institutional authority are actually part of the process, the contribution that digital and media literacy make to democracy. And certainly in inviting people to see themselves as agents of social change, right? Because when people have digital and media literacy competencies, they're empowered to speak out on behalf of missing voices and omitted perspectives, right? And they have the skills to use their powerful voices and their rights under the law to improve the world around them. So, theoretically, the concept of media literacy as supporting citizenship and democracy comes by means of that critique of authority and recognizing one's own identity as an agent of social change. But the reason why I built Mind Over Media was my increasing concern about high levels of apathy and disengagement, right, that are happening all over the world, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And it's accompanied by increased political polarization, not just in the United States, but all over the world. This extreme discourse that is part of the way we do democracy these days. So here's a little preview of Mind Over Media from the video.
Propaganda can be subtle. Are you more powerful than propaganda? The Media Education Lab introduces Mind Over Media.
I don't seem to be.
I'm not getting anything.
21st century propaganda.
I can hear something, but I don't see any.
So you guys cannot hear the voiceover, is that true?
No.
I can hear a vague voice.
Faintly.
Faintly. Oh, let me try making it louder. Hold on.
Nothing.
Today, propaganda is inescapable.
Yes.
In a world saturated with media messages, propaganda can be found in information, news, advertising, or entertainment. And sometimes it's easily recognizable. Other times, propaganda can be subtle. Are you more powerful than propaganda? The Media Education Lab introduces Mind Over Media, an online platform for understanding 21st century propaganda. At this website, you can view and discuss examples of propaganda in print, video, or digital forms. You can exchange opinions about the potential benefits and harms of media messages. Log in to Mind Over Media by going to www.mindovermedia.tv. Mind Over Media.
Okay, so Mind Over Media TV was a project that I got to collaborate on with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. as part of a 5-year exhibit they developed called State of Deception. And they recognized in teaching about Nazi propaganda of the 1930s and the 1940s, they also had an obligation to teach about contemporary propaganda. And this was one of several digital initiatives that resulted from the collaboration between the Media Education Lab and the Holocaust Museum. The way it works is it's a crowdsourced tool that allows you to rate examples of propaganda, and you have to rate them on a scale from beneficial to harmful. And right away, people start thinking, wait a minute, propaganda? Beneficial or harmful? How could that be, right? Because we have some stereotyped attitudes about what is propaganda. When you go to the browse section of the website, you can see thousands of examples of propaganda from all over the world. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to start sharing the live site screen, right? Because let me see if I can do that right now. Because I want to show you that pretty soon this website will have it's essentially a search function. Right now, there's no search bar, and these things are starting to pile up. Like, they're starting to pile up. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, right? But in the new version, which is like right on this tab, there'll be a search so that I could search for terrorism, for example, and I could see examples where the person who's uploaded it, who has tagged it with the word terrorism. Here's one. It looks like it's a picture of the first Thanksgiving done by a classical romantic artist. It's a meme, I think. This is what it is. It says, the irony of refusing aid and assistance to refugees/migrants while preparing to celebrate a holiday about receiving aid and assistance as refugees and migrants. So now I'm immediately invited to rate it. Beneficial, somewhat beneficial, harmful, or really harmful. I think this is a great example of beneficial propaganda, and check it out. As soon as I make my evaluation, I get to see how other people using the site have understood it. So now we have a critical thinking opportunity. Let's have a conversation. Why might some people think this is beneficial and other people might think it's harmful? Why? Who wants to go first?
Well, I can say something. Do you hear me?
Hi, Lisa. Mm-hmm.
Hello. Well, I think that people who agree with this point of view can think that it's beneficial because they feel that it's promoting the correct position, correct view, and those who disagree then think that it's very harmful because it's spreading misperceptions.
Very nice. So we come to propaganda with some pre-existing attitudes, beliefs, and knowledge. For some people, their existing belief system will be activated favorably or unfavorably. Very nice. Other reasons why you think some people might respond to this very positively and other people might think it's really, like, I'm especially interested in your understanding of the use of the word harmful. How could this propaganda be considered by at least some people to be harmful? Go ahead. This is a counterfactual thinking. You have to actually make an argument about which you might not agree, right? So that's called in the literature strong sense critical thinking, when you have to argue a position against your actual worldview. So let's try it.
Well, I think that it could just be emotionally very unsettling to be faced with this dichotomy and have to realize that you're saying one thing and behaving another way, and that's not a very comfortable place to be. And I think it forces that.
Nice. So thank you for pointing out the emotional discomfort that's caused. Someone who thought this was harmful would say it's not fair to compare Thanksgiving to the migration problem, and the comparison is unfair. Some people might find it harmful to make that comparison as if it were obvious, when to them it's not obvious at all, right? So one of the things that's really cool is that that initial reaction creates a lot of opportunities. Now you can see that the person who uploaded it described some background information. They say, the person who uploaded it said, this is an image created for social media to identify inconsistency in arguments for banning Syrian refugees in the US. And they think it's an example of how propaganda responds to audience, right? Or activates audience existing needs, values, etc. And they believe it's propaganda because this is a direct response to arguments to prevent refugees from entering the U.S. It simplifies the concept of providing aid and calls out those opposed to refugees as hypocrites, right? Now, if you want to respond to that, you can leave a comment, and that's, you just put in your email and your display name and you put your comment, and we can see that already 4 people have responded to this, this meme. Christian said, I feel like we should provide assistance to help out when people are in need instead of celebrating, because that's being selfish. Sounds like a high school student to me. Ekram says, this is kind of funny in a way because the Puritans, refugees, destroyed the Native Americans not long after. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe that Syrian refugees would cause terrorism, but other side effects. Now, that is a friggin' awesome, that's a pretty awesome comment that we could talk about, couldn't we? Right? It's almost like in Mind Over Media, these kids enter your classroom and become part of your discourse community, because it's likely that they have opinions that are different from the community norms and the reference set of the kids that you, or that might be in your community. So the idea is this comment thread adds sort of global diversity in a lot of ways. And you can see here's somebody who's not sure that it is propaganda, right? And so he's got an opinion that maybe it's not propaganda. So I really like Ekrem, so I'm going to agree with that. And yeah, I'm gonna agree with that one too, right? And I haven't really looked at the other ones enough to have an opinion. All right, so you got the concept, right? Which is I can not just search on terrorism, but I could search on nutrition or any topic, right? And find some amazing things, or maybe not. But I can also search, I'm going to go to now, instead of showing you the search button, show you the real site. I can show you how these are rated from most to least harmful. So like, check this one out, right? The ISIS propaganda, you only die once, why not make it martyrdom, right? So a lot of people think that's harmful, right? But I can also search from least to most harmful, right? Including some really positive propaganda. Or I can search by type of propaganda, looking only at that activates emotion or only that uses video, right? So it's a really interesting, flexible tool with lots and lots and lots of fascinating examples from, you name it, maybe five continents now, and all kinds of different topics. So I hope you get a chance at the very least to browse around and check out the fascinating stuff that's there. Typically, we invite people to do that by simply going through a exercise where they look at propaganda. And of course, what a coincidence that we can take a look at this one. So let's watch this one, and we're going to ask, is this beneficial or harmful propaganda? Are you ready? Oh. Can you hear it?
Barely.
Okay.
Here it comes. Here it comes. Here it comes. Please don't blow away all your vision and your
You'll look younger, smaller, lighter, taller, tighter than a soft drink. It really works.
Here comes that breeze. Here comes that breeze. Here comes that breeze.
Okay. So from your point of view, is this propaganda beneficial or harmful? What's your opinion?
Well, I've been thinking about this piece and about the previous piece that it's kind of tricky to see propaganda as beneficial or harmful, in my opinion, because propaganda always uses our emotions to promote certain position. And although sometimes this position is our position, so we feel like it's beneficial, eventually it prevents us from seeing different sides of the issue. Even with the immigrants, I liked how this person wrote that, that he or she agreed with the message, but on the other hand, we came, not we, I'm not American, the refugees from Europe came to the U.S., that later became U.S. as immigrants, and then what they did to the native population. So, so if you just focus on the fact that, oh, we are them, then you forget that actually they did a lot of harm. Right? Yeah, so when we just focus on this propaganda, on this like first initial emotion, we forget this complexity.
Right. Right. So what an interesting observation that the challenge with all propaganda is the way it reduces complexity, right? So the reduction of complexity essentially creates a problem for propaganda. Really nice response, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing that idea. I want to talk about how usually pretty quickly kids, when they first get at this sites, now they start poking around, they go like, why is that propaganda? Somebody thinks that's propaganda, but I don't think it is. So then we have to get at the definitional issues, don't we? So rather than blah, blah, blahing at the start about what's the fucking definition, right? We explore the site. We start to form hypotheses about what propaganda is. And now we're curious. Now we might be willing to read a little bit or learn a little bit because now we actually want to know what have people thought. And so we say, well, propaganda has an image problem, right? People think it means bad, right? It's a synonym almost for bad. But propaganda is everywhere. And in the little curricular materials that accompany this website, we learn about how propaganda can be found in journalism and public relations. It can be found in advertising. It can be found in government. It can be found in education, entertainment, and advocacy, right? So people have been debating about what the definition of propaganda is for 3,000 years, right? So it is not settled. It's a contested term. But when you look across the 3,000-year-old history of teaching about propaganda, generally there's widespread agreement of these elements. Propaganda appears in a variety of forms. It's strategic and intentional. Propaganda aims to influence attitudes, opinions, and behaviors. Propaganda can be beneficial or harmful, and propaganda may use truth, half-truths, or lies. Now, that's a very important concept because that means that propaganda is not the same as credibility assessment, right? Because there can be accurate, high-quality information presented in propaganda, right? Here's a big idea. To be successful, propaganda taps into our deepest values, fears, hopes, and dreams. So propaganda can't work without us, right? Propaganda needs us in order to be effective. And so that's why it's really useful for us to think about meaning and interpretation, right? As we understand the power of propaganda. And finally, propaganda is indifferent to the ends means distinction that many of us think is really important to living an ethical life. Propaganda uses any means to accomplish its goal, right? So the definitions of propaganda now invite us to go back to the website and explore again, right? Now, how do we understand how different people might see propaganda in different kinds of media? So, for instance, we could talk about this marvelous political cartoon that was posted by someone, right? It's a political cartoon that shows the classic media framing device we teach to elementary children in the school library, right? Put the world in a frame, right? But this time the world is focused on Paris terrorism while we ignore the bombs dropping in Kenya, Afghanistan, and Palestine, right? We can start by talking about whether we perceive it as beneficial or harmful, but now we can also deepen to think about the techniques of propaganda. Does it activate strong emotion, right? Does it simplify complex information ideas, right? and other techniques that we talk about? So I think that the website is a really flexible tool that can be used in a lot of ways. What's really cool is that people can upload examples from their own world. So here is a photograph that somebody uploaded from their cell phone. It's in a grocery store parking lot, and it's a piece of propaganda on the back of a truck, right? Because propaganda is not just something we see on the media screens in our lives, but propaganda is also something we encounter in the three-dimensional world that we walk around in, right? And so the idea that you can capture it on your cell phone and click to upload it to the website, we think that's really cool. And of course, we can look at all different kinds of propaganda too, right? So it's really clear that propaganda can be harmful because by activating strong emotion, activists and propagandists try to simplify complex issues that encourage people to act without critical thinking. That was Lisa's point when we first started talking. Now, the lesson plans are targeting high school and first 2 years of college, and there are 6 units, starting with defining propaganda, looking at propaganda techniques, looking at propaganda in context, understanding viral media and virality and how the audience participates in spreading propaganda because of the power of virality, understanding sponsored content as propaganda. That's those crazy stories that pop up on your social media feeds, right? That are based on keywords or other identity information that you have provided, that follow you around the internet sometimes, right? And really blur the line, right? Between entertainment, persuasion, advocacy, and journalism sometimes. And then finally, there's a lesson on the ethics of propaganda where people think about ethics of propaganda looking at Hollywood entertainment and looking at controversial advertising and trying to think about the short and long-term consequences of propaganda. So here's a kind of list of the big learning outcomes, right? Learn to recognize propaganda, practice interpretation and critical analysis, think a lot about context and the way messages are understood, reflect on diverse interpretations of messages and try to promote a discourse of respect and trust for differences of opinions, and shift from passive receivers to engaged global participants. We're really thrilled that the initiative is global. And of course, part of my interest in this project is I'm fascinated at the blurring of art journalism and advocacy. And so I've been thinking a lot and writing a lot about how the blurring of art journalism and advocacy actually motivates us to do media literacy, right? To ask critical questions and to engage in connected dialogue in our knowledge communities to try to understand it. So on the website, you'll find a really fascinating Elmo talks to the Surgeon General about viruses, right? And vaccines, which I'm not going to show you right now, but it's really adorable. And we can clearly have a conversation about how propaganda is beneficial. In a way, what we're trying to do is help people recognize the techniques of propaganda, but also the context that shapes how we make sense of propaganda. So we introduced these 5 lenses for thinking more deeply about using the powerful concept of context to improve the quality of our analysis and interpretation skills, right? So when you're thinking about context, you definitely have to start with how you understand what is the message, right? And you have to definitely examine the techniques used. But you also have to think about the means of communication and the format, how the message actually reached its audience, the environment in which people encountered the message, and the audience receptivity. How many people think, how may people think and feel about the message, and how free are they to accept or reject the message? So we introduced in the curriculum the concept of coercion, right? Which is when you aren't really free to accept or reject a propaganda message. That there's because built into the culture, right? The norms of the culture is the acceptance of certain ideas. That's really important because students quickly figure out that propaganda isn't just on your Facebook page. Propaganda isn't just on your TV news. That your school is full of propaganda, right? Absolutely. And so the kids are not dumb, and in fact, they get to that really quickly, and that's a really wonderful conversation to have, right? Okay, so, hold on here. Now, I want before we go too much further, I want to show you another piece of propaganda, and I want to ask you, as you're watching this propaganda, tell me, is this beneficial or harmful propaganda? Okay. Oh, hold on. Okay, so let's have a conversation. Beneficial or harmful propaganda? What's your perspective?
Well, I guess it depends on how you feel about this, whether it's beneficial or not. It's very interesting that it's referencing the first one you saw. Since that one was sponsored by Dove, the one female image issues. So that's a very interesting film.
Yeah, so there's the concept of intertextuality, right? These two pieces of propaganda are like in a conversation with each other. One is imitating the other. One is, so if we think about the villain, victim, hero structure, right? In the first one, the hero was Dove, right? The villain was the beauty industry, right? And the victim was children, right? And in this one, the villain, victim, hero structure is completely different.
Exactly.
I'm glad you noticed it, Gusty.
If you've seen both of them, then of course it helps because they really follow the same format. The first one is Here It Comes, and the second one is There It Goes. Has the music in the background and the girl in the front. I mean, it's very cleverly done, the second one.
Brilliant, brilliant analysis. Other perspectives on, is this harmful or beneficial, this propaganda?
Hello?
Hello.
Am I coming through? Hi.
Yes.
My thought was that I think it's a beneficial perspective until I'm wondering, where did they get their statistics from?
That's exactly my thought. Yeah.
So that's what I'm wondering. I think it's an interesting perspective, and it gives insight into what's going on in Indonesia, but I'd like to know where they're getting their statistics from before I decide that this is entirely beneficial. And I'd also like to know the organization they're backing.
Awesome. So notice how our intellectual curiosity is piqued with propaganda, right? Now, instead of droning on about you should always look for the author of a message, now we actually have a need to know, don't we? Right? So this idea that actually critically analyzing propaganda might be a way to activate intellectual curiosity is a really interesting thing. And so now I want to share with you one last piece of propaganda, and then we're going to open up for like a application session where we talk about like, well, how would you use this and what would you do with it and how could it get better? Because I need to know that too. But I want to share with you, I got the great chance to go to Brussels last week and present this to a whole lot of European educators from 35 different countries across Europe and around the world. And the conversation got really interesting and complicated. So the site has become a lot more international, but it actually started getting international thanks to Lisa Friesum here, who's on the call. And she shared a piece of propaganda with me that's on the website. I'm going to share it with you. And I want you to see if we can work together to generate questions that we could answer. Right? Questions that this piece raises for us. So we're working on this hypothesis, critically analyzing contemporary propaganda activates intellectual curiosity, and intellectual curiosity fuels search, discovery, and then critically assessing material and evaluating it and formulating an opinion. But so while you watch, your job is, what questions does this raise for you? All right, you ready? So let's see, here we go. Let me share my screen with you. So if we had time, we'd talk a little bit about how you learned about propaganda when you were young, why you think it's hard to teach about propaganda now. But we're going to watch this piece. It's on the website. It looks like this. And here's what the piece looks like when you watch it. Just to clarify, the background information says this video shows a digital billboard that was projected on a wall in the center of Moscow. It shows Obama eating symbols of various countries with a list of large numbers of people killed. It identifies him as killer number 1 to the 2016 Hague Tribunal. Okay, so it's possible that short 60-second piece of propaganda raises questions. What questions come to mind for you?
Well, first of all, it would be interesting to know he lived it.
Yeah, what else?
And
what do they mean by him being a killer of all of these people? That's one of my questions.
Yeah. What does that mean? How is Obama responsible for 200,000 dead in Libya? Good. What else? What questions does this piece of propaganda raise for you?
But my author's purpose.
Yeah, good. What else? Of course, one question that I have is the type of propaganda this is. It's like portable, projected technology. So I kind of want to know, like, it's not a kind of digital billboard that I've seen before. Right? And so, and it's obviously, it moves around, right? We saw it in 2 different locations, and it seems like it's a mobile display of some kind. So I just want to know, like, what are the uses of that kind of mobile, portable, digital billboard style, right? Where is that used at sporting events? Or I just don't understand that genre very well, right? So anyway, so needless to say, we've got this hypothesis that it might be the case that learning to critically analyze propaganda actually builds your capacity to advance intellectual curiosity. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you before we open it up to just a general conversation, and I forgot to tell you this earlier. We got really great feedback from teachers as we were developing this, and teachers said to us, look, Renee, you've got a lot of different kind of propaganda on this website, so we would like to be able to make custom galleries. So now I'm sharing my screen with you. Hold on here. So we've created a section of the website called, hold on here, let me just make the screen a little bit bigger. It's called the Classroom Gallery. So anyone can set up their own, it's essentially a subdomain, right? By curating a Mind Over Media gallery that's just the stuff that you want to see in it, not all the stuff that's on the website. Because, for instance, for some learning contexts, a science teacher doesn't want to have to trawl through all that other bullshit politics stuff. They just want the stuff on genetically modified foods, or on, the oil industry, or on carbon politics. And so that teacher can create a custom gallery, right? Give it a name. Like in this case, I've created a custom gallery I call terrorism, right? And it only has the terrorism examples in it, right? But the teacher can then basically control that domain. And what's really nice about that is that when students post in the classroom gallery, their responses come up immediately, so that essentially they can have an online dialogue. It's not moderated. The whole site is moderated by me, right? I go in and make sure that nobody's using the F word and nobody's, doing hate speech, right? When they use the site. But if you've got a classroom gallery, you are the moderator for that, right? And we think that gives teachers a lot of flexibility to scaffold up. So for instance, maybe when students first come to the gallery, there's only 5 pieces there, right? And so then, and basically students are encouraged to build that gallery themselves, right? So we think that gives teachers the flexibility they need to make sense of all this. Okay, so now the question is, how might you imagine using Mind Over Media in the learning context where you work and live and play? Or we could talk about what makes it hard to teach about propaganda and what are you worried about? Because that's a good topic too.
The way I could see I'm a student at Blackburn College. I'm in Dr. Natasha Casey's media literacy course.
Ah, welcome.
Hello. I know we've used Mind Over Media at least once before to analyze propaganda. And I think it would be really helpful to kind of introduce like a classroom gallery and have each of us bring in upload what we think is propaganda and have the class analyze it. I know I'm personally doing a project on propaganda, and so I was hoping this would give me an idea of what that was, and I think this would be a great tool to utilize for my project.
Cool. And I really appreciate your point about your relationship to the site changes when you've got stuff up there, right? Mm-hmm. When you've got stuff up there, you're like, you're part of you're an owner of the site. So as opposed to just using the site to receive propaganda, when you start putting up examples, that I think does shift the way you think about your engagement in the site. So nice point. What else are you thinking about how you might use this site, or what's challenging about teaching propaganda? What might you imagine? How could the site be better?
I'm unfamiliar with the site now, so I can't tell you how it could be better. I probably have a couple of questions about this. I teach community college students, which is a mixed bag of straight from high school to older students. In my case, I teach ESL students, so many of them have been away from school for quite a while and are new immigrants to the country. I'm wondering about things like how long have students been able to add contributions, and has this at all ever been problematic? In a classroom, emotions can get high about things, and I'm wondering how that works to upload propaganda.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. Such a great question. Of course, I'm responsible for maintaining the site, and there have been some examples of propaganda that I don't let come through the gate. I delete it. And mostly it's because the student hasn't actually filled out the description and the context data well enough. So I want the site to be high quality, and if you can't describe it or explain where you got it, then it's not really good enough to go up on the gallery. So there's one kind of quality control mechanism. I think there's also some examples where certain students have uploaded music, right? And if there's anything that will get teenagers riled up, as witness the Genius and the Rap Genius dialogues, right? If there's anything that will get adolescents more riled up than discussions and debates about music and music lyrics, and it's like, well, so part of me sort of like, go do that on Rap Genius, and my site is really not a place to talk about music as music, right? But there are examples on this website of where music is used in ways that the student has well justified our propaganda, right? And so if the student can explain why they think it's propaganda and it's a well-reasoned argument, then up it goes.
Bye.
Thanks for asking that good question. What other comments and questions do you have about this practice of teaching propaganda? How do you teach propaganda now, and what might this website do change or cause to happen differently?
I think in my context, it's an excellent resource, not only because I teach teachers to teach propaganda, especially pre-service teachers. So there's a double layer of understanding. And I think as a resource, I could easily use it for them as students and analyze it themselves, and then learn how to navigate the site as a resource that they can use in the future with their own students. So I really like that aspect of the galleries and the customization of the content.
Yeah.
I will definitely include it into my classroom.
Sarah, we found a really interesting thing when we asked teachers to explain. We asked them to explain to us, how did you learn about propaganda, right? And most teachers have very little memories of learning about propaganda. And if they did remember it, they remember it in relation to the naming of the techniques: ad hominem, glittering generalities, bandwagon, and that was it. Like, as if you named the techniques, that that was the secret, that was the magic sauce, right? So So we think, in a way, this site gets much more deep.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, because it positions propaganda as potentially beneficial, which actually then allows us not to point fingers and blame. Too easily, a rich dialogue gets shut down in a classroom because there's such a clear either-or thinking about value position, right? But here, we actually have to defend why we might think something is valuable, or why someone might think it's harmful. And we think that then stops us from demonizing advertising or demonizing PR, because truthfully, I'll admit it, I'm a propagandist. I'm a propagandist for media literacy.
Aren't we all somehow? But I think the idea to first ask whether it's harmful or beneficial is a good segue into talking about the techniques and so forth, because like with anything, you'll have opinions, and then you'll have the discussion about techniques and authors' intentions and so forth. So that's a really good introduction to the image or the video, and that's an easy way in for students.
It's a good point that that's the first thing we ask high school kids and college kids to do, right? Warrant claim. Right. Okay. So you have an opinion. Well, like, could you defend it with evidence?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that in itself is a good technique for teachers to remember when teaching about propaganda and so forth.
Yeah. Now, one thing I thought might be useful to do is I'd love to send you a. Hold on here. I'm trying to talk and navigate at the same time, and I'm not very good at that. What I'd love to do is post a little link to a Google Doc. I'd love to get your emails, and I'd love to send you no, I shouldn't do this. I'm not doing this. Never mind. I can't. I'm too late at night to be spontaneous. How about if I do it this way? If you would like to participate in a 5-minute evaluation that elicits your feedback about Mind Over Media, send me an email at hobbs@uri.edu. Right? That's probably a good way to do it. Now, let me just do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll let you go. One thing I think that I guess I have to kind of bring the conclusion back to my to my main idea here tonight. I am pretty intrigued about this hypothesis that analyzing contemporary propaganda cultivates intellectual curiosity. Because I get plenty of kids at university who don't have any intellectual curiosity, right? And I have to wake them up. So I like the idea that we might activate their intellectual curiosity. I also think that since propaganda wants us to have strong feelings and then move to action, that what we are doing in media literacy is simply inserting thinking and reasoning, right, in between feelings and action. Like, who could be opposed to that, right? And I also think propaganda helps us really understand how the complexities and layers of context. So back when I was young, in 1985, we called these people freedom fighters, right? And we saw them as heroes. And now, 30 years later, those same people we call terrorists, right? And so I think in some ways, more than ever now, we have to have a rich and contextualized understanding of propaganda. And I think the critical concepts of media literacy, the idea that messages have economic and political power, the idea that people interpret messages differently, that messages use different codes and conventions, that they're representations, and that they influence our attitudes and behaviors, I think the key concepts of media literacy can help. In fact, I feel pretty optimistic about this idea that we can address high levels of apathy and disengagement in the political polarized climate that we live in. I think it's possible that media literacy can create high levels of engagement, activate critical thinking and empathy, and inspire collaborative and creative approaches to reduce inequities. I actually think it can make a dent in moving that needle. I hope that you continue to explore the resources and materials. I have written about the topic here, and the 2 articles from 2014 and 2013 are on the Media Education Lab website. So if you go here to the website and you search under research and scholarship in the bar, under the home on the far left side, you can find those papers. I also want to let you know about the next upcoming webinars. On Monday, April 11th, we are introducing Ready. This is a really new approach to code to learn. It's David Benaham, who's created kind of an alternative to Scratch. It's an open-ended software creator that lets you make your own apps or games or software. It's really easy to use and awesome, and he's going to show us what it's all about. On Tuesday, that's actually not the right title. On Tuesday, May 10th, Jonathan Friesem is doing a session called Media Production and as Conflict Resolution. That's the title. Media Production as Conflict Resolution, or Conflict Management. I think that's the title. Looking forward to that. And on Monday, May 23rd, Haley Dunn, a PhD student here in the Department of Psychology, she's doing a dissertation on social media literacy and substance abuse prevention. So we're really excited. Hope you join us in the Zoom room for that. Anyway, it's time for me to say goodbye. Thanks for joining us tonight at the Media Education Lab. I'm Renee Hobbs, and I hope you join us again. And do me a favor, spread the word about Mind Over Media to your social network. And then maybe we'll talk again in the fall as the real propaganda wars heat up. You guys could try it out this spring, and then I'll invite you to come in and tell some stories about using it with your kids, okay?
Okay. Deal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.